friend. It's a rainy, crappy day.
Yo, man, check it out. Episode 323 of this ish. Power metal. Some people like it. Some people hate it. A lot of people are into the real German, Teutonic, Halloween, Blind Guardian, Scanner, Rage, Running Wild type stuff, which I can understand. A lot of people are really into Sabaton, Rhapsody, Camelot, Powerwolf, Sonata, Arctica, which I don't understand. That stuff, not so good.
Whew.
But hey, whatever, you like what you like. At least you're not listening to nu metal or black and shoegaze. But for me, the two best places for power metal are one, Japan, specifically a lot of the Visual K stuff. Check out episodes 225, 218, 214, 210, 146, 145, 231, 233, 235, 237, 247 for more info on that kind of stuff. But my other place for power metal gotta be the United States of America.
It's pissing me off. It pisses me off.
Whether it be, you know, the big boys like Manila Road, Fate's Warning, Iced Earth, that kind of thing, to the more underground favorites like Omen, Crimson Glory, Liege Lord, Broke His Helm, even a lot of newer power metal bands that I've enjoyed come from America: Visigoth, Pharaoh, Twisted Tower Dire, Slough-Fag. But some of the coolest US power metal, or USPM as the internet has decided to call it, I want to say within the past 10 or so years, is the real obscure stuff. We're talking bands that might have done just one or two super unique, really original sounding albums. Not just stuff that kind of aped whatever the European power metal bands at the time were doing. We're talking just, these guys were almost a genre onto themselves with these little mini bursts of activity. For me, that's the core of what makes US power metal great. We're going to cover 3 of those kind of bands this time around, because I got a good feeling that you might not have heard of any of them, or at least 1 or 2 of them. First up is Griffin, from California, formed 1980, put out 2 albums in the mid-80s, and then just kind of vanished, which is a damn shame, because especially on their second album, I mean, if you're talking about some kind of weird power metal that don't sound like anybody else, 1986's Protectors of the Lair. Whew, what an album. This stuff is by far the most aggressive power metal I have ever heard. Almost kind of has a black metal feeling to it at times, with how much tremolo picking there is. At the same time, there's like a D-beat thing going on here. Like a hyper-aggressive, hyper-melodic version of Discharge, but coming from a heavy metal context instead of a punk one. I feel like the later, more kind of power metal-y Darkthrone albums might have been trying to replicate the style, and indeed Fenriz himself is an avowed fan of this particular Griffin effort. Also, holy shit, those vocals are fucking intense. Nobody else sounds like that. Like, honestly, total buy or die type album. Particularly for the fast songs like this one, which just gotta be some of the most tense, coiled snake, ready to strike type metal available, both in the time period and even like nowadays. This shit just strikes me as unusually intense. Even the more conventionally melodic, lead guitar-centric sections just are these super rushed bursts of noise. But where this album really sticks out for me are on its vocal components and in the rhythm guitars. Like, this whole riffing section right here, solid as fuck, very well put together, and just stupid fucking intense. Like I said, it sounds like it could have come out yesterday on like one of those Darkthrone songs where they're trying to sound more heavy metalish. But this is 1986. They were like intense retro metal before intense retro metal was a thing. As I mentioned earlier, they do have 2 albums, and while I absolutely worship Protectors of the Lair for its intensity, their first album, Flight of the Griffin, is no slouch either. I mean, it's nowhere near as fast and violent as that first album, but it has its own charms. Got a real great sense of melody and a little bit of like gothic doominess to it that I find to be rather interesting. A lot of the vocal melodies and the guitar work is somewhat comparable to Candlemass, but these guys weren't ripping Candlemass off. This album actually came out 2 years before the first Candlemass album ever dropped. And this album also gives a good place to reveal the ultimate secret behind this band, in that almost everybody in this band was in metal church back in their demo days. And you can definitely hear that kind of atmosphere coming through. I mean, if you've seen my Metal Church episode, you know how I feel about them. Depending on how you look at it, Metal Church, one of the best thrash metal bands of all time, or one of the best power metal bands of all time, one of the best speed metal bands of all time. Metal Church is definitely fucking sick. And if these Griffin guys had only put out Flight of the Griffin, they would have been an interesting sort of footnote to the story of Metal Church, much in the same way the band Heretic is. However, the fact they cranked out that second album, which is an all-time classic, puts them on a whole nother level of band. And it's not like Protectors of the Lair completely abandoned the doomy feel of their debut in favor of the really fast and harsh stuff. There's still a little bit of doominess to the second album. If anything, when they do get doomy on that second album, it's even darker sounding than their first. A lot of that has to do with how their skills as guitar players grew in the 2 years between their first and second albums. But a lot of it also has to do with one of the things that really sets apart Japanese and American power metal from a lot of the European power metal forming, and that's their emphasis on these very amorphous, non-standard, not your typical verse, chorus, bridge, chorus type songs, and how they're written. These songs are almost constructed more like black metal or death metal in songs, and that they feel like this narrative journey. Like this song we're listening to right now, Tame the Lion, nothing even resembling a conventional sort of vocal verse happens until like 2 minutes into the song's runtime. And when that verse does hit, it's still pretty weird. Like it does this abrupt jump from mid-paced heavy metal into the faster style they open the album out with before going to some crazy fucking leads. Just absolutely frenzied, chaotic shredding that still maintains, that melodic power metal core to everything, despite how frenzied it sounds. Before then completely departing from the conventional structure again in favor of, I don't even know what to call this part. You got this wacky cinematic fade out with the cymbals washing over everything. And then it turns into an In Flames song is the only way I can describe it, man. It sounds like early fucking In Flames. This medieval sounding acoustic folky outro that has its own sense of structure to it. This album's all over the place in a good fucking way. And I would highly recommend both Griffin albums, particularly the second one, Protectors of the Lair. Go and get it. Best power metal album you've never heard. Up next, we're going to the other side of the country. Going over to New Jersey.
You must have free tokens at the tunnel. I just expect to make a dime with this fucking stonewaller.
Now these guys are actually still around and active and putting out albums today. They're kind of like Agent Steel in terms of their lyrical content and overall presentation. Wacky conspiracies, ancient aliens, Nephilim, that kind of stuff. It's like Agent Steel with way more consistent music and less hype. And they've been putting out what's essentially been really respectable speed metal, power metal type stuff since their second album in 1988. But their first album, the one from 1985, entirely different beast, completely different style. Much like that second Griffin album, nothing else quite sounds like it, both at that time back in the 80s and even today. This album's called Battle at Helm's Deep, named so way before it was cool to be into Lord of the Rings, and features in its original form maybe one of the worst album covers of all time. I mean, bro, what is that barbarian dude doing on the left there? Straight goofy looking motherfucker. My version of the album has like a reissue cover that looks a lot better. And if you really want to, you can actually flip the cover over and have the original one. That being said, the original cover does sort of fit just because of how weird and out there this album sounds. Like that Griffin album, there's an emphasis on really amorphous song structures, as well as certain aesthetic flares that honestly bring to mind modern day folk metal more than anything else, just taking place in the 80s. There's a heavy emphasis on these like kind of neoclassical, sort of renaissance-y, medieval-y type guitar harmonies. That seems pretty ahead of its time. But yeah, like Griffin, amorphous song structures, sometimes the vocals don't kick in for a long time. But when they do, they're not standing for power metal at all. I mean, these guys are from New Jersey, and appropriately, this vocal performance is very Bobby Blitz from Overkill-esque. And yeah, I mean, the leads are amazing and melodic like you would expect from a power metal band. But this weird combination of Dungeons and Dragons medievalism with very Bobby Blitz kind of East Coast thrash metal style vocals, wholly unlike anything else I've ever heard. And as you're hearing with the riffs right now, stuff gets real dark, and oddly progressive metal sounding. These guys are from the same part of the country and the same scene that gave us, Overkill, Nuclear Assault, Demolition Hammer. So there is going to be a decent amount of thrash metal brutality sneaking its way in, vying for space with the progressive power metal stuff. Like this shit right here, this is just straight up crunchy East Coast style thrash metal. I mean, it's got a little bit of a power metal sheen to it, but this shit'll definitely have you moshing. And then the vocal parts kick in, you get this wacky hybrid or real sleaze metal hours with this medieval minstrel kind of storytelling approach. It's like if Bobby Blitz from Overkill decided to become a skald or something. So fucking cool. And speaking of so fucking cool, check out these little guitar accents going on here. This becomes a major part of this particular song, Downfall. The little guitar accents going back and forth. Combining that with all this like sleaze metal chorus vocal technique repurposed to tell these medieval fantasy stories, as well as the very amorphous progressive song structuring, like with this cool little fucking riff set right here, just super fucking neat and unexpected, as is the cool little transition bit afterwards, taking you on that musical odyssey. Here comes the transition bit, it's super fucking neat, very dark sort of power metal, and then jumping back into the little guitar accents, kind of jumping back and forth across the stereo, panning, communicating with each other. That first attacker, man, Battle of Helm's Deep, much like Griffin's Protectors of the Lair, absolutely essential US power metal type stuff. From there, we're gonna head a little bit north into New England, Danbury, Connecticut to be precise, with Sacred Oath. Again, another one of those bands that did a little bit in the 80s and went away and came back with a whole bunch of new stuff, but that first album they did in 1987, A Crystal Vision, might be the weirdest album on the playlist for tonight. And it may also feature the best guitar work of all three bands, at least in terms of their abilities to create guitar harmonies. The album starts out, they move from that really eerie sort of shit into some absolutely heroic, kind of misty, mysterious sounding power metal. And man, does this shit hit hard. Got these quality melodic palm muted riffs, and then that lead guitar hits, dude. If you're into early John Arch era Fate's Warning, specifically like Awaken the Guardian, Spectre Within, you need to hear this album, because it's going to tickle that same itch and then some. And that includes wacky fucking vocals, because this dude's definitely doing that all over the place sort of melodicism you'd hear from John Arch, mixed with almost kind of like a King Diamond-esque predilection towards utilization of falsetto. You got these low-pitched, shouty vocals mixed in with the weird, atypical sort of melodic vocals and the total like King Diamond style thing going on. Nobody fucking sounds like this guy, and he might be a bit abrasive to some, much in the same way the Attacker guy is probably for some of you pussies out there, but I fucking like it. It's heavy fucking metal. It's not supposed to be accessible for the normies out there. And like their neighbors to the south, these guys get pretty fucking thrashy at times while still keeping that same sense of melodicism. They got this really solid combo of the heavy palm muting with the very consonant, soaring sort of melodies, bolstered by the absolutely cosmic sounding harmonized lead guitar stuff. I mean, this sort of metal, this is like comfort food for me, man. This is where it's at. This is what 80s power, Dungeons and Dragons, whatever the fuck kind of metal's supposed to sound like. And like the other two bands we covered today, these guys have a tendency to craft some very amorphous, not the band but the term, non-traditional song structures. My favorite song on the album, Rising from the Grave, starts out real heavy and real fucking doomy, before then going into this almost undescribable, weird fucking choral and drum-led section. Very occult, spooky sounding,
Boo! Haunted house!
type shit. Downright eerie. Again, kind of feeding into the King Diamond comparison I made earlier. And then you get the crunchy fucking distorted guitar, doom metal type shit coming back in, letting you know that we've officially descended into hell, heralded by some awesome thrash metal that comes at you out of nowhere with an abruptly sped up section, conjuring some real fucking darkness here, before then bringing it back to the more familiar realms of darkly melodic power metal. Whatever Twisted Tower Dire was smoking on their demos in their first album, these guys clearly got something out of the same batch, because this is some crazy good, well done, progressive, dark power metal shit. And like Attacker, these guys definitely hit you with the cool little guitar guitar accents jumping back and forth across the music. And also, like Attackers, there's some good thrash metal shit going on here, man. We even got fucking gang shouts going on, dude. From there into a really weird sort of lead guitar coda explosion of melody, leading us back into the spooky shit from earlier. But it's not gonna be the exact same spooky shit from earlier. It's new spooky shit that kind of reflects the older spooky shit. You know, you got your same choirs and whatnot, but new elements have been added. The melody's a little bit different with more layers and components. Like you got this really cool, spacey sort of bass line, very nicely done, and then they hit you with it.
The time has come for all to take the sacred oath.
Did they just hit us with a fucking band name title drop?
He did it! He said it!
I'll fucking give it to them, man. They deserve it. And they bring back in that thrash shit from earlier. Gang shouts and all this time with some dank fucking double bass drumming under it. That's the kind of quality you can expect from Sacred Oath's A Crystal Vision. Great fucking album. Outstanding fucking album. Attackers Battle at Helm's Deep. Outstanding fucking album. And Griffin's Protectors of the Lair. Why are you not listening to that album all the time? It's so fucking good. All three of these albums, amazing. I tell people I like power metal, they're looking at me like, what, dude? You Rhapsody, Nightwish, what are you talking about? No, I'm talking about shit like this, okay? This is some of the best stuff ever when it's done correctly, like it was by all three bands. US power metal. It'll put some fucking hair on your balls. Thank you for joining me for this ball inheriting session, and I will see you next time with some more good shit.
But that taco was amazing.